And I am honored to be here for a few reasons. And I wanted to start off by acknowledging the lands we're in, right? Currently, we're standing on Tohono O'odham lands, and we need to give respects, for being able to be in this land, and give thanks to the ancestors that fought so hard to be able to maintain their land. Despite warfare, despite genocide, despite colonial occupation, they have taken care of this land. So if we could keep that very closely in mind as we're going about our lives. Secondly, I also wanted to acknowledge what the state of Arizona is facing right now. So for it to be International Human Rights Day, or for us to be commemorating that, or celebrating that, or seeking the implementation of that, is very important to recognize the context that we're in, specifically here in Arizona, because we don't have to go too far to find human rights violations, right? We don't have to go to Latin America, we don't have to go to Africa, we don't have to go to Asia to find any of these human rights violations or any of this genocide taking place, right? It's happening here at our own doorstep, in our own state, in our own homes, and in our own backyards, right? So when we talk about human rights, and in the spirit of what you're trying to do with demanding that the Board of Regents step it up, that's what it's about. So I wanted to briefly go over the definition of genocide. I have it in Spanish, so I'm going to have to translate it in my head. But the definition that the United Nations has provided is that any of the following activities meant with the intention of harm perpetrated against a certain group based on national origin, ethnicity, race, or religious background. Right? It's to intend to destroy it in total or in part. And there are 5 things that they describe that would qualify any specific act from any particular group as genocide. And that is the killing of members of a particular group to cause severe harm to the physical or mental harm of a particular group, the intentional subjugation of group members that could lead to, in total or in part, the destruction of that group, that there's policies meant to impede the birth of particular group members, and finally the transfer of children from one group to the dominant group, right? So here today in Arizona, we are facing genocidal policies that are being implemented here, right? So we have a genocidal policy that the United States, not only the United States government has fully adopted, but more intensely here in Arizona, it is being put in full effect, right? So under this genocidal policy, we have various tactics that are being used against our community. The first tactic is kidnappings, aka deportations, right? So the offices here of ICE in Tucson and in Phoenix have the highest number of detentions and deportations in the country. Under the Obama administration, there have been more detentions and deportations in the history of the United States, more than any other presidency in this country. And they have been very clear and very public that they want to increase that number and break the record that they broke this past year, right? So when we're talking about governmental policies, they have themselves put out a statement, Operation Endgame, saying that they want to deport all deportable, undocumented people from the United States by the year 2012. If that is not ethnic cleansing, if that is not genocide, then I don't know what is. The second tactic has been the attrition through enforcement. And they were very public about that tactic with SB 1070. You make life so impossible and so hard to live that you cut all access to jobs. You cut all access to health care. You cut all access to education. You cut all access for future generations to be born in this country and be considered citizens. right? So you got attrition through enforcement as another tactic that is being used in genocidal policies being adopted by the state of Arizona. The third one is cultural genocide. And you have ethnic studies, HB 2281, currently attacking our students, our youth, from accessing their culture and their history, right? You do that when you're trying to cut something very deep from a group. And that other things, like Dr. Sinkley has said, SB 1070 is trying to attack our bodies. HB 2281 is trying to attack our minds and our spirits, right? You control a group. You control their actions by the access that you give them to whatever information and their cultural background. And finally, the last one is outright physical genocide being implemented through prevention, through deterrence by U.S. border policies that have made it more easily for people to cross in inhospitable desert terrain, and has closed off the urban areas, making the deaths that have happened across the U.S.-Mexico border the highest it has ever been. Over 8,000 deaths since 1994 when these policies were first implemented, right? So you have this physical, mental, spiritual genocide being perpetrated by the United States government and by the Arizona state legislature. Make no mistake about that. And so when we talk about militarization and when we talk about a comprehensive immigration reform, all of that will only increase all this oppression that we're facing. So when we talk about human rights today, and when we talk about these international policies that have been adopted for our sake, supposedly, what I would like to say is, when we go to the border regions, it's not about just adopting it on paper, but implementing it in practice. So how is the university going to be held accountable if they are going to pass that? How are they not going to participate and be complicit in the genocidal policies of Arizona? And then finally, I wanted to say that human rights, I wanted to just briefly read something that I just thought of like when I was sitting right here. And here it goes. What good is human rights if the foundation of the United States was established by force to justify colonization of indigenous lands, slavery of African people, and the exploitation of cheap labor? What good is it to have human rights today when laws today allow people to get separated from their family members, when laws allow children to be left without parents, when laws allow people to be poor, forcing them to migrate? What good is human rights today when laws allow people to die crossing the U.S.-Mexico border? Laws allow people to be exploited for their labor. Laws allow raids, detentions, deportations, and corporate interests like the Corrections Corporation of America to profit from it all. What good is human rights today if laws allow law enforcement to racially profile and murder black and brown people and then get away with it? What good is human rights today if laws allow some to be deemed illegal subhuman beings and others legal human beings? What good is human rights today if laws allow oppression to continue unchallenged, when after the Arizona elections and the will of the few and the privileged allows white supremacy and the attacks on people of color and the poor to continue fully justified, all thanks to the rule of law? What good is human rights today when our own board of regents won't come out in support of human rights and dignity for our community? What good is human rights if we're not gonna push each other, challenge each other to really create a space full of peace, justice, and dignity? Thank you.